your camera off, and you can. Hi, Paul, and you can ask your questions in the chat. If you want to ask a question, we've got one of the team will manage the questions they come in, but not doctor them in any way. So if you use the hand up icon, that would be really good. And if you could stick to questions rather than statements, that would be helpful. And we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And the meeting's scheduled to last for an hour. So after you've finished your question, if you could mute yourself and put the hand down, that would be really helpful as well. So I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick straight off. So I'll start off with Councillor Rajawat.
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Good to have you here. My name is Councillor Shantanu Rajawat, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services, and I'm a Ward Councillor in Heston West. Thanks,
Shan. Lily?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here too. I'm Lily Bath. I'm a Deputy Leader of the Council, and I have a Cabinet portfolio in housing, and I'm a Councillor in the Heston West Ward. Thank you.
And Candice?
Hi everyone, my name is Candice Atherton. I'm a councillor in Hanworth Ward, and I lead on adult social care and health, including public health and workforce at the council.
Okay, thanks for answering. Remiss for me, I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Steve Curran, I'm leader of the council. I'm a councillor in Zion Ward in Brentford, and I have responsibility for planning and regeneration and corporate service. No, not corporate service, but corporate affairs. So as everyone said, welcome. It's really good to be here. First question, what have we got? Have we got anything? No one's got their hand up that I can see.
No questions at the moment, no.
Oh, Paul's got the mark. Well done, Paul.
Paul, if you could unmute yourself, and you have 30 seconds to ask the question, if that's all right. Thank you very much.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm just trying.
Paul, you're on mute at the moment. We just
keeps jumping up and down.
It's not your fault, Paul.
We can't hear you. Bear with us.
Right. I think I'm now.
We can hear you now. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Look, just a few questions. I looked at the budget numbers, and of course the numbers don't actually tell you very much because they don't actually change very much from year to year. But I wondered, I had a few questions here as to where things were showing. The first question I had was actually in relation to public health, which has not really changed since 2019-2020. It was 10.5 million then, and it's a budget of 11 this year, and last year was a revised budget of 11, which rather surprised me because we've got a pandemic on, and I would have expected public health expenditure to have gone rocketing. And it's not so much that the amount you're spending this year is too high or too low. It's actually, why was it so high in the previous year, which is probably not a question I should be asking on this budget, but it is very odd that there's not much change in public health. I recognise that you get a lot of this paid back from government grants and so on, but that was my first question. My next question really in relation to consultants, and I suppose this is more of a, is it value for money as opposed to how much money are you spending? My own observation here in relation to consultants, particularly the commonplace people, but also in relation to strategy plans and so on that you've had, is that you're not really getting value for money for that. And if you could comment on that, I'd be grateful. And then thirdly, in relation to traffic schemes, you've presumably received large grant from the government, and have you made provision for repaying it when you have to reverse the low traffic neighbourhoods and street space schemes? I couldn't see a provision for repayment of any grant that you'd received. And finally, have you made provision in the climate change emergency, where you're going to apparently change all the boilers, I think, in all the council housing and council buildings? I couldn't see any provision for that expenditure, which seems to be a really massive expenditure that you're proposing to make over the coming years.
Thanks,
So
Paul.
that's it.
Shan, do you want to come in on some of those? We can divvy up the questions, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. I know Candice will probably want to say something on the public health grant. Obviously, the public health grant covers quite a bit of activity, albeit from smoking cessation to weight loss, and the grant, as you alluded to, has pretty much stayed constant over the last couple of years, and we use that for different things. I suppose you're right to point out, obviously, with the pandemic, you would expect public health expenditure to go up. However, that's because it's being reflected, the expenditure in COVID is being reflected across many departments. It's not necessarily just the public health budget that we'd expect to go up. We'd expect the general grant to go up to cover some of the service-related pressures, and I know Candice will want to say more on that. In terms of consultants, obviously we've been doing a lot of work around consultants. We acknowledge that occasionally we need to bring in that external expertise, and we do so on the basis that there is a very defined business case for having that consultant in. There is a defined start date and an end date, and if that consultant or that consultancy needs to be extended, there is a clear reason as to why and how long we keep them on. But yes, we like to rely on internal expertise wherever possible, but we do acknowledge that sometimes we have to bring in external expertise. I mean, I can make the political point here. We've been cutting staff for the last 10 years, and invariably with redundancies, you do lose a lot of expertise out of the door that you would value to keep if you could at all. In terms of the boilers, I know Councillor Bath will probably want to come in on that, but that from memory is funded through the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, which is a separate ring-fenced set of money, and we've done quite well in terms of our house building, so we do get quite a good amount of money from government towards that, because we are successful in our house building programme, and that helps us look at ongoing maintenance and how we incorporate the climate emergency into that. But I hope that's a good start. I'm sure colleagues will want to come in on that.
Yeah, Candice, do you want to come in on the public health point?
Here we go. Thank you. I've managed to switch devices. Yeah, really good question. So I think it's really important to just note that a lot of the spend that would sound like it would be public health spend that happened over the pandemic, what we used, we used money that came from central government to respond to those issues. So I think that's why there hasn't been a significant increase. It's an area that's so important to us at the council that we really make sure that we're trying to invest in keeping our population healthy and doing lots of preventative work, so that to try and ease pressure on our health service, and also 'cause it's just obviously much better if we can keep people healthier in the first place. So there's been some really great ambition within the public health, and our new director arrived only a few months before the pandemic, and we sat down and she's had such a brilliant vision for taking things forward, and then obviously the pandemic kicked in and everything kind of had to be prioritized. But that being said, obviously it has affected some of the priorities for public health going forward, but mainly it's just a refocusing. Obviously in public health we're already aware that certain groups would be more disadvantaged, and that's where you've really got to make sure that you're targeting money to communities who are more likely to be facing issues around obesity, who are more likely to be making sort of choices around health that aren't necessarily the best choices. Lots of working with school around keeping children healthy, lots of work around physical activity, as Councillor Rajawat already said, talking about smoking cessation, supporting women through like maternity, and also lots of work. Sorry, I've just lost my other. And obviously there was a big program before the before the pandemic around just general vaccinations as well. Really trying to make sure that our community is aware of all the vaccinations that they need to be having, mostly around childhood vaccinations. So yeah, it's a brilliant team. A piece of work that we have done over the pandemic has been having like health trainers, health champions, and that's been really successful as well, as far as getting people trained up who are already active in their community. But I have to check. I think that again has probably come out of extra funding because of the pandemic rather than from the initial public health budget. But yeah, it's a good budget, but it's important that that money is spent because we want to keep our population, our community as healthy as possible. And it's also working really close with lots of other areas, including like leisure and transport, and really trying to make sure our ambition is that we can have the healthiest people in our borough.
Okay, just one more answer from Lily on the green agenda for our housing and how we're going to meet the carbon target of 2030, carbon neutral.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Curran. Just before I talk a little bit about that, just wanted to add to what Councillor Atherton has said regarding the public health budget. Of course, obviously, public health is extremely important now, but going forward in terms of dealing with the pandemic and the recovery process. But to give you an example of some of the public health work that is not done through the public health agenda. So obviously, very early on in the pandemic, all local authorities needed to get street homeless people off the streets in secure accommodation to ensure that they are safe, and that was money provided from the government specifically for getting rough sleepers off the street, and that was around 6k. Obviously we spent more than that, and the rest of and obviously we spent a substantial amount on making sure that people who were facing homelessness, particularly hidden homelessness, and were approaching us for housing, were assisted through other grants from the government. So that's an example of where the money would not have come out of the public health budget. But obviously the work still continues. In terms of retrofitting and our green sort of agenda and our commitments, obviously we want to retrofit as many of our properties as possible, because not only is it good for the environment, but it also helps our tenants to save money in the long run. So that is obviously an initiative that we will continue. In terms of the retrofitting of the boiler, as Councillor Rajawat stated earlier on, is that the money comes, I will need to check that, but I believe that the money comes from the housing revenue account, which is money that is money collected from rents, and it is money that we will obviously use as well in terms of building our increasing our supply of homes, which of course is what we need in terms of dealing with the housing crisis. But I think I'll leave it at that at the moment, Councillor Curran. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your questions, Paul. Next question. If we could, no, Paul, I'm sorry. You've had four.
Hi, Paul. Could you
Paul,
unmute
you've had
yourself,
four questions. You've had four questions. You've had four answers. We're going to move on to the next. You might not like the answers. I understand that. If you want to put any further questions in the chat, we'll happily come back to you on that, Paul, if not tonight, outside of the meeting. So please put in your contact details, and that's for everyone. Try and keep your questions to one question so we can accommodate everyone on the call. That would be really helpful. Delighted to see Councillor Hearn on the call. But Sam, just so you know, we're going to be taking calls from residents first, and if it all dries up, then we'll come to you at the end. Is that okay? So next question, please. Thank you very much, Paul.
As far as I can see, Councillor Curran, there haven't been any further questions.
No.
No. Unless oh, there's one that's come up here. Bear with me. Okay. The concierge service in many of the council blocks is being taken away. Please, can you help explain?
Lily, do you want to deal with that one?
Thank you. I can deal with that. Firstly, there have been no decisions to take away any concierge services, so I'm not sure where that information has been obtained from. What we are doing is doing a consultation in terms of improving our services to residents. And I think this is really important because one of the things that I've learned as a cabinet lead in housing, responsibility for housing, particularly on our housing estates, is that it's really important that we are responsive in terms of meeting tenants' needs. And that is that we are there for them when we need them, but we're not just there to collect rent, but we're there to help and support them in many different ways, and particularly moving forward post-COVID. So that is what we are doing at the moment. It is a consultation, and residents will be able to feed into it, but there have been no decisions as yet as to what the outcomes will be, because that will really depend on what people want, how they want to shape it. So I wouldn't be in a position to share anything at the very early stages. Thank you.
Okay, we've got another from Noel, I think, next.
Yes, Mr. Anderson, if you could unmute yourself, please. Mr. Anderson, you're on mute. Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
I heard you. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Steve and all the other councillors on the programme. I just want to ask you two quick fire questions, and I will not tell you a story, but I really want a really honest answer. One, and this is to do with the budget and generally the rates. What is the percentage increase this year you're proposing for the rates? And will it include, as it's been rumoured, the taxes that the mayor wants in the same time? And the second one is, how are you proposing at least to save money in a situation where we got a COVID virus killing many people, and many people are unemployed in Britain, 3.5. I mentor graduates, senior management graduates. I see the tears coming down their eyes. I want someone to explain to me in honesty. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I'll let Shan come in on the council tax. You're referring to council tax, I presume, Noel. And the mayor agreed his budget this afternoon, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. So that's been agreed. So there will be an increase from the mayor, and there will be a proposed increase from us going to Borough Council next Tuesday to agree our increase of 4.99. But Shantanu will talk about that. As far as job losses, they are, we've got one of the highest rates of furlough in London, and particularly in West London. That's mainly due to the loss of jobs due to the decrease in the aviation industry. It's having a massive effect on us, particularly in the west of the borough, and particularly affecting people under 25 and women in the BAME community. So we're very conscious of that. That's why we've developed our pandemic recovery plan. That was agreed by council earlier at the end of last year, and we're now working to that plan to look at how do we support business, support innovation, support micro businesses, and create new jobs which have been lost due to the decline of the aviation industry. We held our first, the first borough to do this last year was to hold an aviation communities summit, where we had a minister, a shadow minister, attended that conference, because we're not alone being affected by the downturn of the aviation industry. It's happening in Crawley because of Gatwick, and all the other regional airports. So there's a lot in common. So we're working right across the country to try and find solutions to fill that gap because of the job losses lost at Heathrow. So I hope that reassures you. Councillor Rajrat will talk about the proposed council tax increase now.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Noel. And actually, I would just point out, just to sort of tack on the end of Steve's question, Steve's answer, beg your pardon, that certainly in Hounslow, we've really championed this idea of the Hounslow pound. We know that when a pound is spent in Hounslow, it circulates at least 3 times, and that's really important. And so, part of the answer there for you is that we've kind of, to help local businesses and local suppliers, we've changed our procurement practices to add more social value and to prioritise local businesses and smaller businesses, and that's quite important because we acknowledge that we tender a lot of contracts out, and often the large multiples will get contracts because they have the scale. And actually, if you pivot your procurement activity a little bit, you can bring in the local suppliers who then will likely employ local people as well to the local economy. So that's just on the end of Steve's answer there. In terms of council tax, yes, it's no secret that there is an increase in the council tax. As Steve said, it is 4.99%. We've always said that we wouldn't increase the council tax unless we absolutely needed to. And I can assure you, when I have discussions with my own political group, they go on for quite a while and they are quite robust, and we talk through it quite a bit before we make that decision. Of that 4.99%, 3% goes straight into adult social care. That is a practice that's been going for a couple of years now. From my perspective, again, I would like it if government funded adult social care adequately, so we didn't have to put 3% straight into it. But we acknowledge that we are where we are. I would say with this increase, we are one of the features of the budget has been a lot of uncertainty. Announcements that should have been made around grants that we would receive came through very late, and when they did come through, they made commitments for a year only. That's not a political point, as my director of finance would like longer term certainty. So you'd like a settlement that deals with 3 years at least, so that we can kind of plan for the future. And 1 year doesn't really help us. So there is a lot of uncertainty. Government back when the first lockdown was announced did say to us, do whatever you need to do and we will reimburse you. We're still yet to see that. So, I'm very clear about this council tax increase. It protects services into the future. It gives us a little bit of certainty so that we can plan and make some choices. And I very much call it a COVID tax. I don't call it a council tax increase. In terms of the mayor's element, there is, as Steve said, the budget was passed by the Greater London Authority today. That includes a 9% uplift in the mayor's element of the precept, which the community secretary agreed to without referendum. That will be used to fund the deficit that exists in TfL because of the operating, the revenue going down due to lockdowns, but also to fund frontline policing, which I think people in London will value. Having police on the street again will be really welcome. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. And this is just a reminder to everybody that if you do want to ask a question, please use the hand button on Teams. Raise your hands via the button on Teams. Thank you.
I was just wanting to come back on that. Is that okay?
The
Steve?
trouble is, Candice, we've got Paul. Paul, you're talking, but you're on mute.
Oh no, that's Noel talking.
Mr. Anderson.
Sorry, Noel. No, we couldn't hear you because you're on mute.
You're still on mute. You have to unmute. Oh, perfect.
Thank you. I can't see your face, but thank you very much, whoever you are. Thank you.
That's Amy.
Just very quickly, I make a comment. you said the mayor has to increase the taxes, but my own personal feedback here to the mayor, and if he's listening, I don't think he is, that he doesn't pay the TfL senior managers such excessive amount of money. He has to cut that. He's got to say there are people who are unemployed in London, crying, suffering, people losing their jobs. £150,000. It applies to British Gas. It applies to BT. My comment.
Thank you, Paul.
Very much.
We'll pass that message on. Candice, did you want to come in there?
Well, the press should do that. And the Daily Mail does that.
I just wanted to say, and usually Councillor Rajwat never sort of fails to say this, but it is really important because especially you were talking about suffering and raising taxes when people are struggling so much. But we do have a really generous scheme so that people who are falling on very hard times, and especially now because of unemployment rates so high because of the impact of the pandemic, people can be discounted, and we've got lots of residents who don't pay any council tax at all because of the situations that they find themselves in. So we do feel confident that for the very most deprived people in our borough, this increase will not impact on them. We fully recognise that we can't be asking for money for people who just haven't got any money, but also obviously a lot of this money does go towards adult social care. So I always want to really make it clear to people that adult social care, our main costs in adult social care are paying for people who care, our carers, and also paying for placements. And people get placements because it's a legal requirement under the Care Act. So if people meet a threshold that they need to be cared for, then it's the local authorities that have to make sure that we're delivering that care and finding those placements. So and that nationally, there is just massive increase in demand in that area. Lots more people, partly because of our ageing population, partly because of our increase around special educational needs, learning disability, and learning difficulties is an increase in that community. So the costs are just getting bigger and bigger. And as Councillor Rajwat said, we would love to get some security around our funding for adult social care. At the moment, we get something called the Better Care Fund and then the Improved Better Care Fund, but that just comes annually. We don't even know if it will definitely come every year, and we can't plan. So what we're really asking from the government is just long-term certainty. It's a green paper that we've been waiting for a number of years, but then we can be in a much better position. And as Shantanu did say, at the beginning of the pandemic, the promise from the government was that we just need to deal with this pandemic and sort of we'll worry about the money later. But now the way that we are meeting these costs is that we're being allowed to ask the money from our residents. That's that is not the position that we would like to be in, but that is the position. It's the government have said the way to have local councils to have more money is to put up the council tax. So that's what we and most of the other boroughs across London and local authorities across the country are having to do.
Yeah, thanks, Candice. You should add, it's irrespective whether you're a Liberal Democrat borough in London or a Conservative borough in London or Labour, they're all putting up 99.9% of them putting up council tax this year. So everyone's hurting wherever you live in London. OK, Amy, next question.
Oh, there's a question that's come up. Is this true? 51.045 in Mr. Curran's case is the proposed increase 47.1% per annum, bringing this total amount to 51,451. Is this true?
Yeah, those are the proposals in the paper which we're going to the Budget Council meeting on Tuesday. Just on the SRA, so people are clear. The recommendations came from an independent report in 2018-19 that was commissioned by London councils, which recommended what the average pay should be for councillors and for those receiving special responsibility allowances like myself. Even with that rise, I will still be below the average in London. So will the other recipients of if it goes through next week who receive SRAs. We've not had an increase in SRAs since 2010 when they were cut by us when we came in by 20%. So there's no increase for nearly 11 years, and we cut it by 20%. So picking up Noel's point earlier on about the people being paid properly, I think we're going to be paid the average across London now, and I think that's the right thing. The report absolutely clear about encouraging diversity in the council and councillors, and that's not just about from ethnic backgrounds. It's about gender. It's about economic backgrounds as well. So if I use the Will Carling analogy, you would describe me as an old fart, and I'm retired. The previous leaders have been retired, most of them, at the council. And I think we should be encouraging younger people like Lily and Candice and Shantanu to go for the senior leadership roles. And you can't do that if you're not paying a reasonable amount of money. Not a lot of money, a reasonable amount of money. The other thing people should be aware of, we do pay national insurance and tax on that. We don't receive any other allowances. So that's really important. And nor do we receive a pension. So the government some time ago stopped councillors being able to receive a pension. So if you're someone in your 30s and 40s and you want to become a leader or a deputy leader or a cabinet member, and you had to give up your job or work part-time, you would then have to make provision for your own pension as well. So that's an added burden on people. So I'm clear that for the future, not just for now, but for the future, in the next administration, in 2022, and the one after that, we need to encourage a younger and more diverse workforce, i.e. councillors, into politics. And one thing that's very clear from the report is that we must do that. We must ensure that we've got a wide breadth of people coming into local politics to match the vibrancy and the diversity of our borough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. We have had some messages. Councillor Bath, I see you have your hand up. We're going to go to the message first because they posed their question before you, and then we'll come to you afterwards if that's okay. So thank you for your replies, but no response has been given regarding provision for the LTNS and other traffic schemes expenditure, grants and potential repayment. Consultants, no info given as to how value for money is assessed after the event. No substantive details is given on the spending of the enormous 11 million PHE budget, even if it is funded by central government. On the retrofitting of boilers, etc., the council intends to spend 300 million.
Amy, all we're going through is Paul asking these questions again a different way.
Okay, we'll move to Councillor Bath. Thank you very much.
It's a good try, Paul, but we will give you written answers.
I'm happy to give Paul more further details on the retrofitting of the boiler. That's not a problem at all. I just actually wanted to add to what Councillor Curran has said regarding the proposals in terms of members' allowances. I'm a great believer that it's really important to have diverse people from different walks of life and backgrounds to represent the council. And the reason being is that decisions that members make and the council makes can have far-reaching consequences to our communities for years to come. And you've seen that during the pandemic, the fact that the council was at the forefront of ensuring that all our residents are protected, and that we make sure that we sort of lead on a really robust and green recovery in terms of moving forward. I think if you do not pay members the amount that they should be receiving, even just an average amount, then you are really only ever going to get privileged people to stand as elected members and councillors, and I don't think that makes good decision making. And that, to me, is one of the reasons that I believe it should reflect not just a responsibility, but it should reflect and encourage people from different walks of life to participate so that they can give up a job or can afford to be a counsellor, because that's important. Because if you can't afford to be a counsellor, then you're not going to be, and we're not going to get a diverse range of members involved, which means that we won't get diverse decision making and ultimately good decision making. But that's all I need to add to that. Thank you for letting me in, Amy.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Amy?
Yes, there is. There's one question in the chat. Now is not the time to draw extra pay. I would suggest waiting until the COVID pandemic has passed and we know where we stand financially.
Yeah, I'll pick that up one. It's a judgment call. The question is quite right, and we've been looking at this for the last couple of years, and there's never been a right time. And I've spoken to people privately outside of the council about this as well, and their view is, and we pride ourselves in the council that we pay people for the worth of their job and what they do and their skills and attributes, etc., etc. And all of the services over the last year that have come into the council back from either charity, which was Fusion, and leisure. That was leisure services. And then you had the collapse of Carillion. All of those people have come back into the council, either directly or to the company, and they're now all being paid the London living wage, and their terms and conditions are much better. So we're proud of that, and I think councillors should be paid a reasonable amount as well. And I don't think being paid in and around the average for London out of the 33 boroughs is the wrong thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. But I hear what you say about is it the right time? It would never be the right time. There would always be someone who would raise a concern. But I think Lily has expressed very clearly why we think it's important that we do it now. So the new administration in 2022 hasn't got to face this dilemma as well. And we've been hedging on this and dancing around it since 2010. So I'm pleased we've made that decision. We need to argue our case. I hope we're doing that this evening, and we'll move forward if it's agreed by council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. This is another opportunity for anyone to raise their hands if they want to ask a question, and you do that via the Teams function. So I think we could be...
Amy?
Pardon?
No one else with questions?
No, we can move on. Thank you.
Well, we can use Sam Hearn now. We let him in early.
Oh, Sam, apologies. Councillor Hearn.
Sorry, Councillor Hearn, 1 second. Let me just unmute you. All right.
Thank you. Just seeking some clarification from Lily Bath. You were talking about the mechanics of investing to make our housing stock, our council housing stock, more of a much smaller carbon footprint, and indeed to make it carbon neutral. I think you said by 2030. Are we actually on track for that? Is that achievable, given the finances and the that are available?
Can I come in on that, Lily? So we've got a council commitment, as you know, Sam, to be carbon neutral by 2030, right across the range of all our services that we provide to residents. And the retrofitting of housing to heat source pumps and other ways of heating our properties is really important, and that's what residents want. That's what the government wants, and we need to try and meet that aspiration. I don't think we've got enough money in the pot to do that yet, and I think over the next year, couple of years, we'll need to plan that into the HRA business plan. But as you know, we've going to planning next week will be our first 5 passive houses, which we hope will be nearly 100% carbon neutral. That's a start. People in the industry are saying retrofitting, is that really the answer, or should we be concentrating on all new builds? So it's a difficult balance at the moment. You're right, we will need millions upon millions of pounds more yet to say we've got a cast iron bottomed out programme of work to retrofit every property in the borough, but we're working on that, and that's something we will aim for 2030.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran.
Councillor Hearn's on mute. He was saying something then.
Yes, Councillor Hearn, please unmute.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran, for a straight answer to a question. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
There's another opportunity. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand via Teams.
Should I amuse Paul by saying to him on the LTNs, Paul, we don't know. You made a presumption that we were that the court case would go against the council and TfL. We don't know the outcome of that. That will be in June, and depending on what the outcome of the court case is, we will have to do whatever the court recommends, and we would work with TfL and the government around any funding that would be required to sort that out. I hope that answers your question, Paul.
Paul, you're on mute. We do have another question here.
We'll come back to you, Paul, at the end if we can.
Thank you very much, Paul. And Councillor Curran, yes. So we have a question on the chat. How healthy can you get budget set for parks and open spaces? I'm not quite sure. I think there might be. Oh, hang on, they've rewritten it. How healthy can you get budgets for parks and open spaces, as over the years some parks have gone downhill?
Okay, so I'll pick on that one first. So we increased our number of parks with green flags last year, and we've got an improvement plan which we'll be rolling out. And in fact, Councillor Rajat and I were in a finance meeting this afternoon, and we were actually talking about capital projects coming forward and how we were going to invest in our parks for next year. So we're very, very keen to invest in our parks. We know that if you look at Gunnersbury Park, if you look at Boston Manor Park, Duke's Meadows, we have been investing considerable amounts of money in those parks and others, and we will continue to do that. So our parks are really important. I think at one point a few years ago, we were the 8th or 9th greenest borough in London. So we've got some fantastic parks and open spaces. They're really valued by our residents and businesses. And you've seen through the pandemic how helpful having that number of good, open, good, clean, green spaces made it better for our residents. So we're absolutely committed to improving our parks, improving our open spaces, planting more trees, planting wild meadows. We're absolutely committed to that. And you would have seen over the last year, the number of community groups have really got stuck in, and not only are they cleaning up their own environments to help us with fly tipping, but they're joining up together and working together, and that's really, really, really encouraging. So a lot more to do on parks. We're absolutely committed to improving them. Hamworth Park, Richard Griffiths is there. So Hamworth Park, we hope in the next few months we'll have a development agreement at Hamworth Park, which will help see the Hamworth Park House restored and some of the parkland. So we're committed to doing that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. We have a question from Councillor Hearn. Councillor Hearn, please can you unmute yourself? Sadiq, are you able to help with this?
Yeah, he's helped.
Perfect.
The owners of hybrid and electric vehicles can pay several £100s and get a charging point in somewhere near where they live. That doesn't guarantee them access to that charging point, and anybody can park in front of those charging points. In other boroughs, and TfL do this, it's actually an offence to park in front of those charging points if you're not charging. Does Hounslow have any plans to introduce similar legislation?
Certainly on the static points, which are already in place, you can't park in those, as you know. But the charging points at a lamppost, I don't think we do yet. I was talking to someone from the Green Party. I shouldn't advertise them, should I? Yesterday, who was commenting on my car. I said I've changed from diesel to petrol, so I'm on that journey. But on a serious point, there was a report last year that if the government was going to, and we're all part of this, the government, the mayor and the councils are going to meet their target, we're going to have to have a complete rethink around electric charging points. Because if we all tomorrow went out and charged our new electric cars, if we had them, the grid would collapse. So this is a massive infrastructure project at a national level, not just at a council level. So I think we'll certainly take that away, Sam, that point about what other boroughs do in relation to electric charging points from lampposts, and see whether we need to consult and change our views on enforcement around that. But I'm reluctant to put in more enforcement. I'd rather do less, but we'll have to, I think, work together on that to see what the best option is. If we are to encourage people to use electric vehicles, not forgetting the price that they're so expensive at the moment, we do need to have enough charging points for them to use it. It's a good point. Well made.
Thank you.
Excellent. As far as I can see, we don't have any questions, so we can move on.
To what?
Is there anything else? Any other questions that anyone would like to raise?
Look, I'm giving an open goal to Paul now. Who's smiling away. Paul, give us another question. Tease us. Oh no.
Alfred has got his hand up.
Hi, Alfred. If you could unmute yourself, that would be fabulous. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, sorry. Well, this is an education for me. The first time I've attended such a meeting, and naturally, I think it prudent to listen rather than trying to lead in any way. But you touched on parking and charging up. Despite my youthish looks, I'm a man of years.
We can't see you, Alfred, so we just have to take your word for it.
I can.
All right, well, thank you for your trust. But so is my wife, and what is becoming increasingly worrying to me, forgive me. Sorry, that's someone trying to reach me. What is becoming increasingly worrying to me is the availability or lack of it of parking in Hounslow. Now, my wife has got underlying conditions, and I also, by virtue of age, additionally, so we have a lot of issues going on. We try to be responsible and mature, so we avoid taking the bus, because we are told by doing so we reduce the risk to ourselves and I dare say to others. Yet when we take the car into Hounslow, trying to find affordable parking is becoming a nightmare. And where my wife had recently to simply go to the opticians to get her glasses, I thought, well, let me just whip in by the side, drop her off, and though it aches my heart that she has to walk the balance of the way, that's the best I can do. And I got a ticket in the post for so doing. I didn't remain parked in the area. I simply took an opportunity to drop her off. And that few moments warranted a ticket. I have, of course, appealed it, and I'm hoping that good common sense will prevail. But to cut the story short, what are we doing about making parking more affordable, especially for those who are obliged to take a car for whatever reasons? Oh my goodness, forgive me.
You're very popular, Alfred. So, Alfred, the short answer is we're not. We're not going to make it easier for people to park, because as you know, we discussed earlier in the meeting about meeting the climate emergency, reducing the carbon footprint of the council, and we want to encourage people to walk and cycle more, and we've all got to play our part. I'm sorry your wife and you have been unwell, and I completely understand you've avoided public transport during the pandemic. That's quite right to do that. We review our parking charges every year, and that will be as part of the budget this year, and there has been increases for residents' parking permits. Because we've got too many cars in the capital, the pollution is too high, and that has a dramatic effect on young people and the elderly, especially those with bronchial conditions. So I understand absolutely how difficult it is for you. We try to encourage people to park in the designated car parks. Obviously, I can't answer any questions about why you've got this ticket for dropping someone off. And just so we're clear for everyone on the call, councillors are not allowed to intercede on fixed penalty notices. That's done independently of us for obvious reasons. So I'm sorry we're in that position, Alfred. So I think that the reliance on the car and people's reliance on it will have to change. And it will. I'm 66 now, so I'm getting in that age gap age range where I'm thinking about mobility, how do I travel around, etc., etc. So it's an important point made, but I don't think things are going to get any easier for you. Excuse me. Candice.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that it's important that you make sure that your wife's not entitled to like the blue badge. Have you explored the blue badge option? I don't know what her health conditions are, but if mobility is, really debilitating, then she might be entitled, and it's the car that gets the blue badge. So even if you're the driver but she hasn't got the access, then you still might be entitled to get a blue badge. And obviously keeping our disabled bays is something that we do prioritise, but we are really trying to respond to the toxic air in London, and we more and more understand how bad that is for all our health, but especially older people and children, and as Steve said, people with health conditions related to their heart, their respiratory.
That's kind. If I may just pop back in for a second, using the bus, for instance, had there not been the immediate difficulties of COVID, we do have at the moment the bus pass, but that, of course, the hours have been restricted, so we are caught in yet another bind. Because we would have weighed up, yes, all right, we better go on the bus despite the advice to avoid the bus. But the bus isn't available to us under the bus pass system because that's time limited. So we're in a bit of a conundrum. And I don't know, it just needs someone to sit down and work this out. But let me stop there, lest there are others who want to ask a question. And I just say to Councillor Steve, enjoy your youth, because there are some challenging times ahead of you.
Thank you very much, Alfred, and all the best to you and your wife. Before Councillor Bath comes in, I've just seen a message there from Councillor Hearn. The reason we didn't want councillors on the call really was because we didn't want them to be political. So he's now making a political statement in the chat, which is completely untrue. I've just talked about my new petrol car, how I can be anti-car when I've just got a new petrol one and I don't own a bike. So there you go. Right, Lily.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Welcome, Alfred, and thank you for answering the question. I actually was going to say exactly the same thing as Councillor Candice Atherton, that I understand your predicament in terms of not being able to use the bus and obviously during the circumstances that we are with the pandemic. But Councillor Curran's absolutely right in the sense that we want to dissuade people from using their cars as much as possible, and that if we are successful in doing that, then that allows people like yourself who do need to come in to be able to use their cars. But Councillor Atherton made the point about having a blue badge, and it might be worth you contacting somebody later or after the call, but it's something that would help you, I think, particularly if there's somebody with mobility problems, but it's worth thinking about applying for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bath. We've had one question in the chat. Do we have any park and ride options in the borough? Some towns and cities do this to reduce cars in town centres.
We don't. I know we do for particular events, like at Twickenham they do park and ride, which then comes into Hounslow, Richard. But we'll certainly have a look at that. It might be for events, Christmas shopping, etc. We could certainly look at that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curran. Does anybody have any further questions before we draw the meeting to a close?
Paul's got hundreds of them. Look, you can see him champing at the bit.
Now let me just unmute Paul 1 second.
Can't hear you yet, Paul.
Well, if you unmute, there we go.
I'll say one thing to Councillor Curran, that actually I don't mind, I don't have a problem with the leader of the council being remunerated properly. So you can take that as some support, I think.
Thank you, Paul. I'll end it there.
I think as far as Councillor Hearn's comment on charging points, the charging point is only available for the party, for the householder who's paid for it. And so the effect of preventing other cars from parking in front of the charging point would be that the householder who paid for it would have a reserved parking space on the street, and we've always set our face against that because that will lead to fistfights. Councillor Curran, in relation to the grant repayment and the provision, if you received any grant in relation to any of these schemes, and you then decide whether or not, because of any legal case, but actually I'm not really thinking about the legal case, I'm thinking about the other cases, if you decide to remove the scheme and you receive the grant, then I think the grant is repayable to central government. And I'm hopeful that you will remove some of these, in fact, possibly all of these schemes. And therefore, if you have received any grant, then there would need to be a provision made to repay any central government grant.
Okay, Paul, point taken. Accept that. And thank you for the one about my salary. I'm really pleased. You're the first one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Amy.
Apologies.
Noel, we'll take your last question or comment, and then we'll call it a day.
It's a comment.
Okay, far away.
Give us some constructive feedback. Firstly, I'm delighted to meet you, Councillor Curran. We worked by email in the past, and I found you a very effective and result-oriented councillor. For that alone, in the presence of everybody else, I'd like to say thank you from me and my wife, Monica, who's not on this meeting tonight. At the same time, I'd like to say thank you to all the councillors who came on board to listen to us and to certainly answer our questions. I think it's quite an interesting meeting and time well spent. And on that basis, I give you one tip. It's not science. It's not the best doctors that we have. It's not all what Boris Johnson says, but human beings have to get on their knees and pray if this pandemic has to go away. Good night, all.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Noel. Right, on that, now Sam's put a question, but we'll review the whole position about electric charging points, which we should do anyway, in light of the new targets and what people are asked to do. Okay, so we'll call it to a close. Thank you very much for everyone, for residents, and for Sam Hearn for coming on, and Paul and Noel and Alfred and others. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, councillors, for coming on, and thank you to the communications and IT team. Thanks very much for your support. Have a good evening, everyone, and see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.